Have you ever wondered why some technologies reshape our world, while others, equally ambitious, vanish without a trace? For every iPhone, why is there a Microsoft Zune? Today, we're diving into history to explore 20 of the most spectacular tech failures. These aren't just stories of failure. They're lessons in how arrogance, poor timing, and neglecting user needs can torpedo even the most ambitious projects. Prepare to be surprised, as some of these colossal flops come from companies you know and love. The world of technology isn't just about success stories like Apple or Google. Behind every breakthrough lie hundreds, if not thousands, of failed experiments and products. Often, failure isn't the end, but a crucial step towards something new. But sometimes it's simply a spectacular flop that burns through millions of dollars and becomes legendary. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So, let's kick off our tour through the gadget graveyard with one of the biggest names, Google Glass. It wasn't just a product, it was hailed as a technological utopia, promising to bring the future to us right here and now. Imagine a world where you no longer needed to pull out your smartphone. All your information, from navigation to messages, projected onto a tiny screen right before your eye. You could take photos with a simple blink or a voice command. It sounds like a scene straight out of a sci-fi movie, and Google poured massive amounts of money into convincing us that the future had already arrived. But reality proved to be far more mundane and even hostile. The main problem, one nobody had foreseen, wasn't technical, it was social. People were terrified of constant surreptitious recording. You could be sitting in a cafe and the person across from you could be secretly recording you. This sparked a wave of distrust and fear. Bans on glass usage emerged in public spaces, and their owners were dubbed, with the not-so-flattering term, glass holes. Factor in the awkward aesthetic that made wearers resemble cyborgs, and the exorbitant price tag of $1,500. Ultimately, Google Glass never managed to answer the fundamental question: what was their actual purpose for the average person? It was a brilliant engineering concept that completely ignored how people actually live and interact. Let's talk about music for a moment. In the mid-2000s, one gadget truly dominated the world: the Apple iPod. It was everywhere. So in 2006, tech giant Microsoft decided they wanted a piece of that pie, and that's how the Microsoft Zune came into existence. And you know what? It wasn't a bad player at all. It boasted a large, high-quality screen, a built-in FM radio, and even Wi-Fi, allowing users to share songs with other Zune owners. Its Zune Pass subscription service was, in essence, a precursor to Spotify. So why did it fail so spectacularly? The reason is simple: it was too late to the party. By the time it launched, the iPod wasn't just a player. It was an entire ecosystem. People had thousands of songs in iTunes, a plethora of accessories, and they were accustomed to the iconic white click wheel. The Zune, however, asked users to start everything from scratch. Its desktop software was clunky, and its marketing was, frankly, bizarre and often ridiculed. The first model even looked like a brown brick. Ultimately, the Zune became an eternal second-place contender, a punching bag for critics, and a stark reminder that even a powerful corporation like Microsoft can stumble badly if it tries to chase a train that's already left the station. Let's shift gears from software to the physical world. Remember the incredible hype surrounding the Segway in the early 2000s? Inventor Dean Kamen and investors, including Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos, promised us not just a new gadget, but a genuine transportation revolution. Rumours swirled that this invention would transform our cities, rendering cars obsolete. The intrigue built for months, and the world held its breath, awaiting a miracle. Finally, the curtain rose, revealing a two-wheeled, self-balancing platform. The technology was undoubtedly impressive. Controlled by body movements, the device felt like something straight out of the future. But once the initial excitement wore off, people started asking practical questions. First, the $5,000 price tag was simply astronomical. Second, it was completely unclear where you were actually supposed to ride it. It was too bulky and fast for sidewalks, yet too slow and vulnerable for roads. Ultimately, instead of becoming personal transportation for everyone, the Segway found its very modest niche. It became a trusty companion for security guards in malls and a fun novelty for tourists. It was a brilliant engineering feat, but one that ultimately proved completely disconnected from the real needs and infrastructure of our cities. Let's take a trip back in time to the era of enormous televisions and clunky videocassettes. This was a true battle of giants, a fierce format war, and Sony's Betamax emerged as its unfortunate, yet technically superior, protagonist. If you were to ask any engineer from that period, they would tell you Betamax was better, and they would have been right. The picture quality on Betamax tapes was noticeably sharper and more stable than that of its main competitor, the VHS format. The tapes themselves were also more compact and convenient. It seemed like Sony had victory firmly in its grasp. So, where did they go wrong? It all came down to critical details that truly mattered to the average consumer. The first major issue was recording time. Early Betamax tapes could only hold about an hour of video. VHS tapes, right from the start, offered 2, and later, even 4 hours of recording. For a family wanting to record a full-length movie off TV, the choice was clear. But the biggest nail in Betamax's coffin turned out to be its business strategy. Sony zealously guarded its proprietary technology. JVC, the creator of VHS, took a much smarter approach. They freely licensed their technology to virtually any manufacturer. As a result, the market was flooded with dozens of cheaper VHS players from various brands, and video rental stores quickly standardized on them. Ultimately, Betamax, despite its superior quality, simply couldn't compete with the sheer volume and accessibility of VHS products. It's a timeless lesson that the best product doesn't always win. We're used to thinking of Apple as a synonym for success: iPhone, iPad, MacBook. But long before these triumphs in the early 90s, the company made a very expensive and notorious mistake. Its name was the Apple Newton. It was one of the world's first personal digital assistants, or PDAs. In fact, Apple even coined the term. The Newton was meant to be your personal secretary in your pocket, a device designed to replace your notepad and organizer. Its main killer feature, and simultaneously its Achilles heel, was handwriting recognition. You'd write on the screen with a special stylus, and the device was supposed to magically transform your scribbles into typed text. On paper, it was a true revolution, but in practice, this magical function became a target for widespread ridicule. It worked so poorly and unpredictably that it even made it into The Simpsons as a running gag. Add to that its high price, bulky size, and short battery life, and you had a recipe for disaster. Ultimately, the Newton became a valuable lesson. A brilliant idea ahead of its time is doomed to fail if the underlying technology isn't ready. But it was precisely on the foundations of this project that Apple would later build its mobile empire. Virtual reality. Today, devices like the Oculus Quest and HTC Vive are commonplace in the gaming world. But picture this: 1995. Nintendo, at the peak of their power in the gaming market, decided to do something no one else had even attempted: launch the world's first home virtual reality console. Sounds ambitious, right? And so, the Virtual Boy came into existence. It was an epic, unmitigated disaster. Instead of a full headset like we have today, it was a cumbersome binocular-style viewer mounted on a stand, forcing users to crane their necks at an uncomfortable angle just to look into it. But the real problem lay within. To cut costs, Nintendo opted out of colour screens. All the graphics were rendered in unsettling shades of red and black. It didn't just look terrible, it caused severe eye strain, dizziness, and even nausea for players. Nintendo even had to include a health warning on the box itself. People would buy the console, play for maybe 30 minutes, and then return it to the store, complaining of headaches. Ultimately, the Virtual Boy was pulled from shelves in less than a year, becoming one of the legendary company's most infamous missteps. It was an attempt to jump into the future, but it ended in a very painful stumble. Now here's a story that perfectly encapsulates the sheer absurdity of Silicon Valley startups. Picture this: Juicero, a juicer. Not your average juicer though. This was a smart one. It connected to Wi-Fi, cost a hefty $400, and looked like a piece of high-end design. This juicer didn't take regular fruits. No, you had to buy special, pre-packaged bags of pre-cut, pre-mixed fruits and vegetables. You'd insert a pouch, press a button, and the machine, with an incredible force, reportedly equivalent to lifting 2 Tesla cars, would squeeze out the juice. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? Yet investors, including Google, poured over $120 million into this startup. They bought into the vision of Internet of Things for your kitchen, and it might have all worked out if Bloomberg journalists hadn't conducted a simple experiment one day. They took one of those expensive pouches and simply squeezed the juice out by hand. It turned out you could extract the juice faster and easier with your bare hands than with the $400 smart machine. The entire Juicero business was essentially a giant, expensive, and utterly unnecessary pouch press. When this revelation hit the internet, the startup became a global laughingstock and quickly folded. It's a perfect example of technology solving a problem that never actually existed in the first place. Even the world's most successful companies aren't immune to failure. A prime example, the Amazon Fire Phone. In 2014, Amazon was a tech titan, riding high on its dominance in online retail, cloud services, and Kindle e-readers. It seemed only logical that their next big move would be a smartphone, one that could truly compete with the iPhone and Android giants. Jeff Bezos himself personally oversaw the development, and the company poured immense resources into the project. The phone's headline feature was meant to be dynamic perspective technology. 4 front-facing cameras tracked the user's head movement, creating a seemingly 3D holographic effect on the screen. It looked like magic during presentations, but in reality, this magic proved to be a mostly useless gimmick that rapidly drained the battery. But that was only half the problem. The entire phone was designed as a glorified billboard for Amazon services. Want to buy something? There was the Firefly button, which could instantly recognize any product and offer to buy it on Amazon. Ultimately, users felt they weren't buying a smartphone, but rather a very expensive advertising brochure. Sales were catastrophic. Amazon was forced to write off an estimated $170 million in losses, and the Fire Phone quietly vanished. It served as a painful, expensive lesson for the company. Never prioritize your business interests over the needs of your users. Just as we saw with the Betamax and VHS war, history has a habit of repeating itself. In the mid-2000s, the tech world once again found itself divided. This time, the battle was over. Which high-definition disc format would replace the trusty old DVDs? On one side was HD DVD, backed by giants like Toshiba, Microsoft, and several major Hollywood studios. On the other, Blu-ray, championed by Sony, alongside Panasonic, Philips, and other companies. Initially, the playing field seemed relatively even. HD DVD was slightly cheaper to manufacture, giving it an early edge, and many experts even tipped it for success. But Blu-ray had a powerful ace up its sleeve: the PlayStation 3 gaming console. Sony made a brilliant strategic move, equipping every single PS3 console sold with a Blu-ray drive. Meanwhile, Microsoft offered an HD DVD add-on for its Xbox 360, but only as a separate, optional accessory. As a result, millions of gamers buying a PlayStation 3 automatically became Blu-ray player owners. This created a massive user base that ultimately tipped the scales. Film studios, one by one, began abandoning HD DVD support, and in 2008, Toshiba officially conceded defeat. It was a clear example of how one smart play in a related industry can single-handedly decide the outcome of an entire tech war. Let's shift our focus from hardware to software. If you ask any seasoned Windows user which operating system was the absolute worst, most would, without a second thought, name Windows Vista. It was released in 2007, replacing the incredibly popular and stable Windows XP. Expectations were sky high. Microsoft promised us a revolutionary design, an unprecedented level of security, and stunning performance. But what did we actually get? A genuine resource-hogging monster. Vista was so demanding that most computers of the era simply struggled to run it properly. It was slow, buggy, and prone to constant freezing. The new translucent aero interface looked beautiful, but it required a powerful graphics card, which many users simply didn't have. The real headache for users, however, was a new security feature called User Account Control. Every single action, even the most trivial ones, installing a program, changing settings, triggered a persistent pop-up window asking, "Are you sure?" It was absolutely maddening. As a result, millions of people either refused to upgrade from XP or, after buying a new computer with Vista, tried to roll back to their previous operating system. Vista was such a monumental failure that Microsoft had to rush out Windows 7, which was essentially the same Vista, but with all its shortcomings ironed out. Social media, a battlefield strewn with the wreckage of companies that dared challenge Facebook. And perhaps the most notable casualty on this battlefield was Google+, launched in 2011. Google seemed to have all the ingredients for success. Billions of users across Gmail, YouTube, and search, massive financial backing, and top-tier engineering talent. It seemed inevitable that they would finally build a worthy competitor. The premise was actually quite good. For instance, Circles allowed users to easily group their friends, so you wouldn't accidentally post party photos for your grandma to see. But the execution ultimately failed to deliver. Google's desperation to catch up with Facebook led to overly aggressive tactics. They began forcibly creating Google Plus profiles for anyone who used their other services. Want to leave a comment on YouTube? First, you need a Google Plus account. This sparked widespread outrage and frustration. But the biggest problem was that the social network felt desolate and lifeless. All your friends were already on Facebook, and there was simply no compelling reason to migrate them to a new, unfamiliar platform. As a result, Google Plus quickly became a ghost town, a place people stumbled into by accident. After several years of unsuccessful attempts to revive the project compounded by a major data breach, Google finally conceded defeat and shut it down for general users. It was a stark lesson. Even vast sums of money and cutting-edge technology can't compel people to socialize where they simply don't want to be. Let's talk about an internet giant that once reigned supreme. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, for millions across America and Europe, America Online, or AOL, was the internet. They were the undisputed kings of the dial-up era. And you probably remember that iconic modem connection sound. AOL offered an all-in-one package: internet access, email, chat rooms, and news. They famously flooded mailboxes with millions of their installation CDs, and their iconic phrase, "You've got mail," became a true cultural phenomenon. But while AOL was raking in billions from its slow metered dial-up access, the world around them was rapidly changing. The era of high-speed broadband internet was dawning. This is where AOL made its fatal mistake. They were so entrenched in their lucrative, outdated business model that they completely slept through the broadband revolution. Instead of leading the charge in fast internet, they continued to see it as a threat. Their catastrophic merger with media conglomerate Time Warner in 2000, widely considered one of the worst business deals in history, ultimately sealed the company's fate. While competitors were laying fiber optic cables building the future, AOL remained, metaphorically, the internet on a disk. As users realized they could get faster, cheaper internet access without AOL's proprietary, often clunky software, they began leaving in droves. The king's reign ended, but he seemed oblivious to the fact that his kingdom had already crumbled. Before Facebook completely dominated the social media landscape, the throne belonged to another giant, MySpace. For a generation of mid-2000s teenagers, MySpace was their entire universe. It was a place to connect with friends, discover new music from your favourite bands, and most importantly, truly express yourself. Every user had complete freedom to customise their page, choosing backgrounds, colours, fonts, and even adding music that would automatically play when someone visited. While pages often looked chaotic, flashy, and even a bit garish, they were undeniably unique. So, what went wrong? Firstly, that very freedom of customization ultimately became its downfall. The site became bogged down with slow, blinking GIF animations and user-generated code, making it sluggish and unstable. Secondly, MySpace struggled to contain the overwhelming amount of spam and fake accounts. But the final, fatal blow came from Facebook. Facebook emerged as MySpace's polar opposite, offering a clean, simple, standardized design where every page looked identical. Initially, this uniformity seemed boring, but it quickly became clear that users value convenience and speed far more than the ability to add glitter to their background. While MySpace, acquired by News Corp, struggled to reinvent itself as an entertainment portal, Facebook stayed true to its core mission, facilitating connection between real people. Users began to migrate en masse. In just a couple of years, MySpace transformed from the undisputed king of social media into a forgotten digital ghost town. Let's rewind to the not-so-distant past, to 2020. Enter Quibi, one of the most ambitious and costly failures in streaming history. The core idea was genuinely intriguing, even logical. People were increasingly consuming video on their smartphones, often on the go or during short breaks. Quibi's pitch was content specifically crafted for this, high-budget series and shows, starring Hollywood talent and directed by industry giants, but delivered in bite-sized 5 to 10-minute episodes. Their unique selling point was turnstile technology, which allowed seamless switching between horizontal and vertical viewing, with the picture smoothly adapting. For this vision, founders Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman, true industry titans, managed to raise nearly $2 billion in investment. But from the very beginning, things started to go wrong. First, the service launched right at the height of a global pandemic. With everyone stuck at home, the need for on-the-go content vanished. Instead, people were binging Netflix on their big-screen TVs. Second, Quibi's content was locked behind a paid app. Users couldn't screenshot or share funny moments on social media, effectively killing any chance of viral spread. But the biggest blow was the realization that people simply weren't willing to pay for short-form videos when free platforms like YouTube and TikTok offered an endless immediate supply. Ultimately, despite those billions in investment, Quibi announced its closure just 6 months after its launch. It became a classic case study of a project completely out of touch with market realities and its target audience's true needs. Not all technological failures are simply about bad products. Some are outright deceptions that shatter lives and erode trust in innovation. And arguably the most infamous example of this is Theranos. Its founder, Elizabeth Holmes, famously dubbed the next Steve Jobs, or Steve Jobs in a skirt, promised a medical revolution. She claimed to have developed a groundbreaking device called Edison, capable of performing hundreds of complex blood tests from just a single drop, taken with a simple finger prick. It sounded like a miracle. No more painful needle pricks, no more long waits for results. Theranos quickly attracted hundreds of millions of dollars from powerful investors, struck deals with major pharmacy chains, and Holmes herself became a media darling, gracing the covers of top magazines. But there was just one fatal flaw. The technology simply didn't work. The Edison device was a complete fabrication. In reality, the company secretly conducted most tests using conventional, off-the-shelf equipment from other manufacturers, diluting the tiny finger prick samples to achieve the necessary volume, which led to catastrophically inaccurate results. When journalist John Carreyrou's investigation finally exposed the deception, the entire Theranos empire crumbled like a house of cards. This wasn't just a story of a failed startup. It was a story of egregious lies that jeopardized the health and lives of real people. Let's cast our minds back to the late 90s, when the internet was just starting to make its way into homes. This was the peak of the dot-com bubble, an era defined by a frenzied rush to invest in virtually any company with .com in its name. The quintessential symbol, the very icon of this speculative frenzy, was the online retailer Pets.com. Their concept was straightforward: sell pet supplies, food, toys, and accessories online and deliver them directly to customers' doors. To establish its brand, Pets.com poured exorbitant amounts of money into marketing. Their mascot, an endearing dog-shaped sock puppet, became instantly recognizable, appearing everywhere from TV commercials and parades to a coveted Super Bowl ad. The company went public, soaring to a valuation of hundreds of millions of dollars at its peak. However, beneath the flashy branding lay a fundamentally flawed business model. They were selling heavy, bulky bags of pet food at a significant loss, as the shipping costs frequently outweighed the price of the product itself. Pets.com was quite literally burning through investor cash with every single order. Their strategy was to first capture market share, then figure out how to achieve profitability. But that then never arrived. When the dot-com bubble finally burst, investors quickly stopped pouring money into unprofitable ventures. Pets.com declared bankruptcy just 9 months after its IPO, and its beloved sock puppet became a somber reminder of an era when grand ambition often overshadowed sound economic principles. Microsoft made numerous attempts to conquer the mobile market, and each time they failed. But perhaps the most prominent and painful of these attempts was the Windows Phone operating system, launched in 2010. And this was a case where the product itself was genuinely good. Instead of the familiar app icons seen on iPhones or Android devices, Microsoft introduced a completely new, tile-based interface called Metro. These live tiles displayed notifications and updates directly on the home screen. The system ran incredibly smoothly and quickly, even on less powerful hardware. Many critics and users who dared to try it were delighted by its freshness and originality. So why did it fail? The answer can be summed up in one word: apps. It was a classic chicken and egg problem. Users didn't want to buy a phone that lacked Instagram, Snapchat, or popular games, and developers weren't willing to invest time and resources in creating apps for a platform with a small user base. Microsoft tried to solve this. They paid developers and created tools to easily port apps from other platforms. Nokia, their key partner, released excellent phones with some of the best cameras on the market. But it was already too late. The Apple and Google ecosystems had become so vast and self-sufficient that breaking into that closed loop was virtually impossible. Windows Phone remained a brilliant idea relegated to the sidelines of history, proving that in the modern world, a good product alone isn't enough. The ecosystem is everything. While Windows Phone endured a long, drawn-out agony, the Microsoft kin was more like a supernova that burned out almost instantly. This project stands as one of Microsoft's most bizarre and illogical blunders. In 2010, just ahead of the Windows Phone 7 launch, the company unexpectedly unveiled 2 phones under the kin brand. They were specifically designed for a very niche audience, young people deeply immersed in social media. Featuring a slide-out QWERTY keyboard, these devices were solely focused on social networking. Think Facebook, Twitter, and MySpace. They famously lacked an app store, games, or even a basic calendar. The main selling point was Kin Studio, a cloud service that automatically backed up all your photos, videos, and messages. However, there was a major catch. Mobile carriers required the same expensive data plans for these limited feature phones as they did for a fully fledged iPhone or Android. This meant the teenagers Kin was targeting simply couldn't afford the total cost, and those who could naturally chose a real smartphone with thousands of apps instead. Sales were nothing short of catastrophic. Microsoft pulled the Kin from production a mere 48 days after its launch, marking one of the fastest and most embarrassing failures in mobile history, reportedly costing the company around $1 billion. Remember Vine? Long before TikTok took over the world, it was Vine that gave us the format of ultra-short, looping videos. 6 seconds. That's all you had to tell a story, showcase a trick, or make millions laugh. And that limitation sparked incredible creativity. The platform launched entire stars, Viners, who became genuine celebrities. Vine was a cultural phenomenon. It gave us countless memes and catchphrases that became part of internet folklore. The service was so popular that Twitter acquired it even before its official launch. It seemed like a perfect match. Short videos for a short-form messaging platform. But Twitter never quite figured out what to do with its acquisition. While Vine stars were racking up millions of followers, they received no financial support from the platform. There were no monetization tools, no partnership programs. Meanwhile, competitors like Instagram and YouTube actively began poaching popular creators by offering them real money. Consequently, content creators started leaving, and their audience followed. In 2016, to the shock and disappointment of millions of users, Twitter announced Vine's closure. It was a tragic story of owning a cultural treasure and simply discarding it due to a fundamental lack of business vision. Rounding out our list is a failure that was quite literally explosive. In 2016, Samsung, Apple's primary rival in the smartphone market, unveiled its new flagship device, the Galaxy Note 7. On paper, it was almost the perfect phone. It boasted a gorgeous curved screen, a cutting-edge processor, what was considered the best camera on the market at the time, water resistance, and of course, Samsung's signature S Pen stylus. Initial reviews were ecstatic, with tech journalists hailing it as the greatest smartphone ever made. It seemed Samsung was finally poised to deliver a crushing blow to the latest iPhone. But soon, alarming reports began to surface. One after another, user phones started spontaneously igniting and even exploding. Images of scorched and charred devices flooded the internet. The problem proved so severe that airlines worldwide banned the Galaxy Note 7 from all flights. Samsung initially attempted a recall of the first batch and replaced them with safe units. However, when even these new, supposedly safe, replacement devices started catching fire, it became horrifyingly clear the issue ran far deeper. As later investigations revealed, in their quest to make the phone as thin as possible, engineers had left insufficient space for the battery. When the battery heated up, it would expand, leading to a short circuit and subsequent explosion. Ultimately, Samsung was forced to halt all production and issue a complete global recall of every Galaxy Note 7 ever sold. This incident cost the company billions of dollars and inflicted an immense blow to its reputation, transforming what was hailed as the year's best smartphone into one of the most dangerous gadgets in history. So, what ties all these stories together? A closer look reveals a few striking patterns. First up, arrogance. Companies like Google with their Glass augmented reality device or Amazon with the Fire Phone were convinced they were creating revolutionary products. They forgot to ask the most fundamental question: do people actually want this? They were building technology for technology's sake, rather than solving real problems. The second common thread is a fatal flaw: being late to the party. Microsoft's Zune and Windows Phone were actually solid products, but they entered a market where Apple and Google had already planted their flags and built impenetrable fortresses of apps and ecosystems. Sometimes being second to market means getting nothing at all. But here's the most fascinating twist. Many of these so-called failures weren't truly failures after all. The technology pioneered in the ill-fated Apple Newton laid the groundwork for the iPhone and iPad. The painful experience with the Virtual Boy taught Nintendo invaluable lessons about what not to do, ultimately leading to the massive success of the Nintendo Switch. Even the defunct Google Plus provided the company with invaluable account data, which they still utilize across all their services today. These failures were, in fact, stepping stones. So, the history of tech failures isn't just a graveyard for bad ideas. It's a textbook filled with valuable lessons about innovation, marketing, and human psychology, lessons that continue to shape the world we live in today. Thank you for watching until the very end. If you found this interesting, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more fascinating stories from the world of technology. What's the most memorable tech failure for you? Did we miss any major ones? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts.